So let's bring on our dear friend. Here, excuse me, folks. Another NFC Championship game for Merrill. I mean,
another Super Bowl.
Another Super Bowl. I mean, come on, Merrill. I mean, it's getting old hat now for you, isn't it?
Well, there were long stretches of nothing. I can tell you that in 48 years, we had long stretches, and but lately it's been pretty darn good. I mean, this is the eighth NFC Championship game we just finished since 2000.
How about this?
Ninth if you count Dick's in 1981.
How about this, Merrill? So I got my partner here, Zander Krause. All he knows is winning. Okay, like since 2000, all he knows, and I'm going like, you should have seen it before when Dick Vermeil showed up. It wasn't all that hot there from about 1970 to about, would you say about 77, somewhere in there when Dick started turning things around, 78, 79, something like that when he started turning it around?
He came in 76, and 77 was my first year in the booth. But we knew the minute he arrived that this was a special guy. We knew he would do it. You love Buddy. You had great conversations. We've talked about this before, but I said this to Coach Vermeil, and I'll ask you. When you look at a guy like Andy Reid, and then obviously, I'm getting ahead of the interview here a little bit, and then you look at Andy in Philadelphia, and then you look at Andy today. You look at Dick Vermeil when he was in Philly, and you look at Dick Vermeil when he was in St. Louis. Those guys went kind of through the same journeys a little bit. They didn't get the big one in Philly, but yet there was more composure. It just seems they're easier guys to get around. Do you think they have that same? Are they the same type of personalities, Dick Vermeil? No, not at all. Not at all. They're very, very different. Dick was easily the most intense coach I have ever been around, and he's my favorite. And we've been friends ever since. I talk to Dick every week, except not on the air. But Dick is a close personal friend, and I love him. I think he's the best. But he and Andy were quite different in their approaches, in their demeanor, and I think the world of Andy Reid too. I do. And there were a lot of coaches that I really, really liked personally. In fact, there were very few that I didn't like personally. And again, the only one I say that I didn't was Chip, because he wouldn't give me the time of day or even acted as if I existed. But when I talk about Ray Rhodes was a great guy. Great guy. Ray Rhodes was a great guy. Buddy, you couldn't get through to Buddy until you passed some kind of a test. And once he accepted you, oh my goodness, he told you too much. he told you stuff you shouldn't really know. But Buddy was great. Buddy was great. Doug Peterson was absolutely a wonderful, wonderful person. And I honestly believe Jacksonville made a big mistake in firing him this year. They had to change general managers, which they ultimately did. And I think they would have been fine leaving Doug in place. He needed a team. He needed much more talent to work with. But Doug's a terrific coach. It's just a shame they parted ways. But Doug's also a great guy. And Dick is a great guy. Dick is a great guy, terrific guy. But here's the big difference. Going back in history, Dick was so intense that it took so much out of him. And of course, in 1982, which was his last year, that was the year of the players' strike.
Yep.
And he almost felt betrayed when that whole thing, and it was so unpleasant. There was a real war between the owners and the coaches. And then he came back and nobody expected it. I broke the story of Dick Vermeil. And a player, I was doing the morning sports at WIP along with the games, and a player called me in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m., and said, listen, Dick is going to resign today. And I said, what? And it was the off season. Dick is going to resign today. I said, are you sure? Player that I was close to. He said, Merrill, he went over to Leonard Tosa's house tonight
and got together with Leonard and Jim Merrill, who was the general manager, and he's burned out. He just said he is burned out. And I came in and I broke it that next morning on WIP at 6:05. And nobody could believe it. When I came in and I told the guys in the newsroom, they said, "You're the lead story." And the phones went off the hook. And the other stations were denying it, saying that it's wrong. They have, that this is, and of course it happened. And they named Marion Campbell the head coach the next, that afternoon. But now Andy was a different story. Andy was not burned out. Dick was away for 16 years before he came back and coached in St. Louis, and then went on to Kansas City. But the thing with Andy, he was not burned out. He had been through a lot. He had won. He had some personal, well-documented troubles with his sons, and then the Eagles began to lose, and I think he was forced into making a change with Sean McDermott. After Jim Johnson died, and the Eagles, and then he threw Juan Castillo in there, who was the offensive line coach's defensive coordinator, and then after that, after his 14th years, it was clear he needed a change, and the Eagles at that point had to move on, and it was the most friendly, warm parting of the ways I have ever seen. They had all the employees come into the cafeteria. And Andy said goodbye to all of them. And it wasn't like out the door, angry. And then I went up to his office and I walked in and he gave me a great big hug and told me how much he thought of me. And I'm feeling awful. He said, "Don't worry about it. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." But he left with everybody in the building, including Jeffrey Lurie, still loving him. It was something that he needed. He needed a fresh start. I think Andy would probably tell you that was the case. And he went right to Kansas City, and he is a Hall of Fame coach.
Absolutely. I mean,
if you look at the numbers, there's a very, very good chance that he's going to beat Shula's record.
Oh, yes.
All time.
Oh, and I think he's going to scoot past Belichick's playoff record, too. And I think there's a great shot over the next couple of years. Mahomes is only 29 years of age.
Let's just hope that one of the Super Bowls isn't this year.
Right on. Merrill, you talk about breaking that story with Vermeil, and I'll tell you, and I think I've mentioned this to you a little bit. I broke the story that Vic was going to the Eagles, and I had the thing early in the morning because I was around Tom Shaw, and hopefully we can reconnect here a little bit here with Merrill. And I've told some of you guys this story before, that I'm down in Orlando. I walk into a building and Crawford Kerr's in there with me, and he's in the building with me. And Crawford Kerr goes like this to me. He owns this thing called the Wing House, and he's a former NFL guy. He played with the Dallas Cowboys. And he calls me in and he goes, "That's Tom Shaw. That's Michael Vick's personal trainer." And some of you have heard this story, and I'm sitting in there. I go, "Yeah, so?" He goes, "Do you see who the guy's in there with him?" And I look over and I go, "Yeah, it's Joe Banner." And let's bring up Merrill here because I want Merrill to hear this. So I'm sitting in the room with Tom Shaw and Andy Reid, and I believe that was Joe Banner. And I go, "So what's going on here?" And my friend Crawford Kerr, on the Wing House at the time, goes, "Vic just signed a contract." This was 10:30 in the morning. I go, "What? With who?" He goes, "What do you think?" I go, "The Eagles signed him?" And they go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, no one knows." I went, so Merrill, I go back to my radio station. I'm sitting around for an hour. I'm little old Dan. I had no idea. So I go on the air and I go, "Michael Vick has just been signed by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's now a new member." They broke the story on ESPN that a radio host in Tampa at the time, that because I knew his personal trainer and I just happened to be in the building, but Merrill sitting around having to dig for meal and everyone going, "No, it's not true." I mean, that's kind of like you got to throw yourself out there a little bit, right?
Well, you know how I found out about it? We were doing a preseason game that night, and it was Mike Quick and me. We're doing a preseason game. And I always, during a preseason game, write topics in my notebook that we can bring up in the fourth quarter so that we can discuss something, because at that point,
Yeah.
the guys in the fourth quarter are only known to their mothers. So I have topics in there. So around midway through the third quarter, now Mike has his cell phone out. Mike says to me, I have some interesting news. I said, not now. Wait till the fourth quarter. He's a little later. He says, I better break this. I said, fourth quarter. A little later, I said, all right, go ahead. And he tells me Michael Vick is signing with the Eagles. I almost fell off my seat, because if you told me to list the teams 1 through 32 who would be adding Michael Vick, I would have given the Eagles 32.
I couldn't believe I was looking at Vic, and I was looking at the Eagle team that came down to work him out, because Tom Shaw worked him out in Orlando. And I'm looking at this going, the Eagles, no way. Of all the teams, my head sewn to the floor. I would have believed that more. And I went, no. For 2 hours, I sat there and I go, I got to do it. I'm the only guy that knows this. And so I went on the air and I broke the story. And then all of a sudden, it just went nuts. And all of a sudden, it started getting up to Philly. People from Philly were calling me. I'm going, yeah, man. I mean, I just happened to be there because I was picking my friend up. And he was a former Cowboy, Crawford Curry, played with the Cowboys forever.
Crazy. Yeah, I didn't think, but it turned out that whatever preconceived notions we had, Michael Vick turned out to be one of the nicest people on the face of the earth, a great teammate, changed his life around. And there's a guy who I root for in every phase of everything he gets connected with. He's just a great guy.
I love him. I'm with you 100%. Tony Dungy was there as well. Tony Dungy vouched for him with Andy, and that's how that whole thing ended up getting done. Well, let me ask you this, though, Merrill. I've got, as I've told you before, Frank Wright and I have been friends for over 40 years. I have it on good insight that if Kellen gets that Saints job, it's Frank's job to turn down. Now, he's still being paid by David Tepper. So David Tepper is still paying him, like Cliff Kingsbury's being paid by the Bidwell still to be the OC. So
I think Frank Reich would come here.
That I don't know, but Frank's been contacted by the Eagles. If you know how he likes contingency plans.
Yeah.
So the contingency plan, from what I'm understanding, having spoken with Frank, that Frank is the first guy up if that ends up happening. The relationship, obviously, with Nick. Nick was his wide receiver coach in San Diego when Mike McCoy was the head coach.
Coordinator.
That's right. And Shane was also involved in that whole dynamic. That what Jalen Hurts watches a lot of Phillip Rivers tape. So that kind of was what they want. He believes, and like he really likes watching Phillip Rivers. Rivers and him have had conversations before what kind of offense that Nick's looking to kind of have eventually down the line. So, what do you think of that?
So Dan, you think that Frank's offensive coordinator in Indianapolis would become Frank's head coach in Philadelphia?
Well,
maybe if he wants to be back in football.
Yeah.
Listen, if that were the case, everybody would stand up and applaud, because Frank Reich is one of the brightest, most talented football people in the entire world. It was just a misfortune that he had to work for the two organizations that he worked for as a head coach, because he's a great football man and could be a great head coach if he were having the support that he had. You know, you remember Billy Davis?
Yes.
Billy Davis, the son of Bill Davis. Billy Davis was the Eagles' defensive coordinator under Buddy, and he stayed here. He stayed here for a little while, and then he said to me, one of the things he said to me, and Billy Davis is a great football man. Under Chip, he had the title defensive coordinator, but he really wasn't. The defensive coordinator of that team, most people believed, was Jerry Azzinaro, who just didn't want the title. and didn't want to deal with the media and all that other stuff. Bill Davis did not have the last word on the defense, but he once said to me, if I ever get an opportunity to be a head coach, I would love to work for a man like Jeffrey Lurie, because all Jeffrey says is yes. Anything a head coach wants. You want this facility, you want these people, you want this equipment. Anything a head coach wants, his answer is a resounding yes. He hires the best people and lets them do their job. Believe me, when you talk about the success of this franchise, there are a lot of people involved. But I will tell you, nobody played a bigger part. It starts at the top. And Jeffrey Lurie is at the top of this organization. And he is the number one reason they are where they are today.
This is why we love talking with you so much, because Frank's been on this program, I don't know, 3 times when he was the head coach of the Colts and after that as well. And I asked him personally who contacted the Colts for Nick Sirianni and he goes, Jeffrey called me first. And then Jeffrey called Bob or Irsay. And that's how that dynamic, and inside that dynamic, that's how they ended up sending Wentz also to the Colts. And Frank was like, yes, I gave him my endorsement for him to be the head football coach, and told him exactly how things work in the Philly organization. There's an analytics department, how he does this and that. He goes, and if you can manage this, you can understand this. And I think one of the reasons, you tell me, Merrill, you know the organization 10 times more than I do. To me, you finally would stop that conveyor belt, the coordinators, with this. I love Frank to death. I've known him 40 years, like I told you. I think you stop that conveyor belt of coordinators on the offensive side, because this will be the 5th one in 5 years for Hurts, because I don't believe anybody's going to be offering Frank a head coaching job anytime soon. And you would have that dynamic of Vic being here for the next 3 or 4 years. So you would kind of calm that down, and you'd get more stability with the coordinators if you hired Frank. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Now, do you believe, let me ask you, I thought Kellen was going to get the job in Dallas.
I did too.
But he didn't. But do you believe that Kellen will get the head job in New Orleans?
I do. And here's why. Because Mike McCarthy pulled out, and I think he was told that they've made a decision. You know, they can't make public decision until after the Super Bowl, especially if there's a coordinator that's in the game.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons that Mike pulled out, that and saying that 26 is going to be his opportunity to go back into the job market. Now, again, that may be true because Carroll got hired this year by the Raiders, but I think that's a telltale sign that Mike McCarthy
Doug stayed out a year before he unfortunately went to Jacksonville.
Right. I think that environment's almost the only guy that I ever remember having success small was Marone, and also, of course, Tom Coughlin had great success. But I do believe that Kellen's going to get that coaching job. Now, you tell me, Merrill, how do you think that, and how do you look at that? 5 coordinators in 5 years for Jalen Hurts. How can you have stability? I mean, Bill Walsh in Montana. Look at Andy Reid in Kansas City. Look at all the real coaches that have had the stability with their quarterback. I mean, boy, that's a lot of different guys with a lot of different opinions.
Same with college, too, going from Alabama to Oklahoma. And so you could add 2 more coordinators.
9 coordinators, I think, in 8 years he's had.
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough, but Jalen can handle it, because what the smart coordinators do, and that includes Kellen, and that it certainly includes Frank Reich, is they put a lot on Jalen's plate and say to him, what are you comfortable doing? They don't say, here's what you're doing. Here's our offense. No, they tailor it to what Jalen's greatest skills and Jalen's greatest comfort zone is.
I asked Dick Vermeil this question, and I'm going to ask it to you. I asked Dick if you learned anything from the Super Bowl with the Eagles that you went and played the Raiders against to when you guys got in the Super Bowl and you played Tennessee and you won. What was the one thing that was different? And he said, I leaned on my coordinators more, and I was patient. Can you take what 22? Now you're taking on this team again. Obviously, different coordinators, a lot of different talent, especially on the defensive side. What will make this Super Bowl different and the outcome different, Merrill, in your opinion, than 22?
One person, Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, best running back in football. That makes it different. You know, there were 8 different starters on defense that didn't start in that Super Bowl. So I'll give you another name, Zach Bond. That's a big difference. Big difference. And then I'll add something to you. Darius Slay, who's the best corner, has had a great year, even though he's 34 years old. He comes back, and then you have the addition of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I mean, we're talking big differences there. I'm just giving you my opinion. Patrick Mahomes is a great equalizer because he's all by himself as the greatest quarterback in the game today. If not, when all is said and done, he could replace Brady as the GOAT. That's going to be tough to do, but he could. We don't know that, but that's the kind of magical talent he is. However, if you look at this roster from top to bottom, it's got more talent than Kansas City.
Oh, yes. There's no getting around that. And, you know, Merrill, I brought this up earlier in the program. That 22 team versus this team, check it out, the front 7. Sweat was drafted by the Eagles. Carter's drafted by the Eagles. Davis is drafted by the Eagles. Milton Williams is drafted by the Eagles. Nakobe Dean, obviously not in there, but this year he was drafted. Oren Burks was a free agent. Got it. But the cornerback now, instead of 2 corners, you have 1 corner that was drafted in Q. You got Slay in the trade. Both safeties that you have now playing in the secondary. One guy was a free agent and one guy is a draft choice, and your nickel is a draft pick. I think you have more homegrown guys, and I think there's always a better feel about what you do things together versus hiring mercenaries.
Well, actually, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a trade, not a draft choice, and Reed Blankenship was an undrafted free agent from Middle Tennessee State.
But you get my premise. There's more homegrown kids on the defense.
And Zach Bond, of course.
And there's more homegrown guys on the defensive side this time because, you know, that 22 team, you had Hargrave in the middle, both linebackers. One was a UDFA. I know TJ was found. He was a UDFA, but Kaiser White was a free agent. Both your corners were free. One was a trade in Slay. The other one, Bradbury, came from New York. So, I mean,
Bradbury
had a different feel.
Bradbury had a very good season, by the way.
He did. But Mayor, what I'm saying is I think there's more of a sense of unity and team pride when you have homegrown kids going and trying to accomplish something.
I agree. And this locker room is a great locker room. These guys really do care about each other. It's not a bunch of selfish guys. I mean, every once in a while, A.J. Brown will say something that gets attention, but he's a great guy. The writers voted, by the way, to name the top 3 people to talk to in the locker room who give them the best and treat them the best. Number 1, Jordan Mailata. Number 2, Saquon Barkley. And number 3, A.J. Brown.
I love it.
A.J. gets that reputation, but he's not the diva that people think he is.
Couple last ones here for you. Okay, Merrill, I'm going to play Angelo Cataldi, and I'm going to play Howard Eskin. By the way, Howard's going to come on in a couple days here. So is Ray Dininger too. He's going to come on. So we're really proud that all these guys are coming on the program like yourself. And I think you had a lot to do with that because they see you on. They're now coming up. Angelo's on every Monday. So I'm going to play Howard Eskin here. Man, did you hear that comment by Jalen Hurts the other day? Jalen Hurts says that the coaches took a straitjacket off me. Finally, I was able to go out there. All right, Merrill. Is he taking a shot at his coaches when he's saying that, or is he taking a shot at the media and students like me when he's doing that?
He's having some fun. He's having some fun in the moments where everybody's celebrating and enjoying it. And Nick did not take it seriously. Nick laughed and he said, that's Jalen just having a great time after the game to say he was able to go deep and open up and air out the arm a little bit. But believe me, there was no malice intended, just Jalen having a little fun. Much ado about nothing.
Okay, for you now, this never gets old. I mean, come on, man. I mean, you're calling another Super Bowl. I mean, okay, you called the one against the Raiders. You called the one in 04. You did obviously the 17. You did 22, and here you are again. Your Super Bowl memories. Just give me a few of them. Let me start with the first one. The one with the Raiders, because you guys were favored to win that game. I believe the Raiders were a wild card team rolling into that game.
Eagles had beaten them during the season.
Eagles had beaten them during the year. Give me a significant thing that always sticks out from that game.
Well, the thing that sticks out, not from the game so much, was the week that Dick kept the Eagles under wraps pretty closely. And the Raiders were out on Bourbon Street and raising Cain and just loose as geese. and they came into the game that way. And the Eagles were tight, and there were some early interceptions, and the Eagles were never really in that game. They were hit. They made some mistakes. I made a statement last week. I said the team that wins the turnovers will win the game. And, of course, that's been the case right through the playoffs. And it happened. The team that won the turnovers back then in 81 was the Eagles turned it over. 3 interceptions in that game, and that was the biggest difference.
04, what was the significant thing in that? And I believe that was a 3-point loss to the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. What was the significant thing that stuck out in that game?
Okay, a lot of people blame Donovan McNabb. And they said Donovan McNabb, they used the C word, choked and all of that. I don't blame Donovan McNabb. Donovan McNabb had a great season. I felt that the biggest difference in that game was the biggest difference was the lines. I felt that the Eagles the Eagles offensive line was unable to contain the Patriots defensive line.
Richard Seymour and them guys.
They had a red carpet to Donovan McNabb. And on the other hand, I thought that the Eagles offense just had trouble getting going at all. And the Patriots were Tom Brady playing at his best and doing the things he had to do, and they were just a better team.
17. In your opinion, you got Belichick and you've got Brady again. Different players, obviously, different coaches, the whole 9 yards, different roster, really, everything. What do you think was the significant thing in that Super Bowl and what delivered Philly their first Super Bowl win?
Well, the day before, I was in the lobby at the hotel in Minnesota, and somebody came up from behind me and picked me up and lifted me in the air. And I yelled, "Put me down, put me down." And I look around, and it was LeGarrette Blount. And then he looks at my hand and he says, "What are you wearing?" And I said, "This is my NFC Championship rings from 2004. And he takes a look at it and he says, "This is a loser's ring. We're going to get you a real ring tomorrow." And that's what he said to me. LeGarrette Blount, I loved him. He was great. But anyhow, they go into that game, and of course, the pivotal play that everyone always talks about. The Eagles have a 4th and goal at the 1 yard line with a second to go, right before halftime, and I said they've got to get the field goal. They cannot come away without points, because I went back to the game, the playoff game against Green Bay many years ago, where the Packers were down at the 1 yard line right before half, and Mike Sherman was the coach, and he went for it, and the Eagles stacked them up, and they trotted off the field. We've got it now. And the Eagles went slinking back to the locker room, and the Packers went on to win that game. But the Eagles went on to win that game because they had stopped the Packers. The Packers went for it at that point, 4th and 1, and the Eagles stacked them up. The Eagles went off with a lot of confidence and came back and won that game. So in this case, the Eagles had the 4th and goal from the 1. And here's another factor. They were going to be kicking off to the Patriots to begin the 3rd quarter.
Huh.
So Patriots going to have the ball again. If the Eagles are stopped right there and take a momentum hit, and the Patriots did come back and scored on their very first possession, but instead it was the whole thing with Corey Clement involved in the touchdown pass to Nick Foles, but I said before I would get the 3 points. So they score, and Mike Quick says on the air, "That's why you're up here and down there." In the locker room after the game, I said to Doug, "That's the worst call I've ever seen with the best result."
I love that.
And he laughed. And to this day, I think it was a crazy call, but it worked. And he had the feeling, and they believed in it. And Nick came to the sideline, Philly, and Doug said, "Go for it."
Oh, God. That gives me goosebumps, man. It's the greatest call.
That will forever be.
Oh.
That will ever be the moment that we remember, and it changed the game dramatically. So I'm going by just conservative. Dick Vermeil told me a long time ago, except at the end of a game when mathematics play into the clock and the scoreboard tells you the story, you cannot get inside the 20-yard line and come away without points. That was a Vermeulism. You've got to come away with points. I figure come away with 3 points. But that will forever live with me as the key to that whole game.
2 last ones here, and I got to get to the 22. Was there something that stuck out to you in that 22 game that was it? What I love this. I mean, Merrill, this is awesome. I mean, because all of these stories I've never heard when it came to those games, because those games are all significant, obviously, in pro football history. And this one here in 22, what do you think was the moment in that game that stuck out for you between Kansas City and the Eagles?
I love Jalen Hurts. I think he's a great quarterback. I believe he's a top 5 quarterback. My opinion of Jalen Hurts from the time he moved into the starting role to this very day has not ever been altered.
No, it hasn't.
I think the world of him. I think he's a great quarterback, terrific quarterback. By many people, an underrated quarterback, and they don't realize what a great arm and a great passer he is. However, early in that game, the Eagles had the lead, and Jalen Hurts just went to turn and spin, and the ball came out of his hand, and the Chiefs scored. It was a scoop and score. That was the one turnover. And what did they lose by?
3.
That was to me, that was, now they came back. They overcame it, and then came the holding penalty that everybody was upset about being called on Bradbury. But Bradbury said, "I held." Bradbury held. So you could say, well, it was so minor, the officials shouldn't have called it. He held. That, but the biggest difference in that game was the turnover. The turnovers kill. They killed Washington. The score was the Eagles won by 32 points. Were they 32 points better? No, they were better, but not 32 points better. But if you give them 3 turnovers and don't take the ball away, you're going to lose 99 times out of 100. There was the game in Washington in Landover earlier this season when Washington gave the Eagles 5 giveaways, 5. And the Eagles lost that game. But they lost that game more because, well, they could have wrapped it up. At the end, there was a little pass from Pickett to Devontae Smith that would have sealed it. And Devontae Smith, who drops nothing, just juggled it and dropped it. That changed that game. And also you were playing for the last 3 quarters without Jalen Hurts. So that's where the turnovers could be overcome. But normally, you turn the football over, you lose the turnover battle, you're going to lose.
Finally here, I believe, Merrill, if this is off the top of my head, so correct me, I think this is your second Super Bowl at the Superdome. I think the Raider game was played in New Orleans, and now it's here
Yeah.
in New Orleans again. Do you like broadcasting in that bowl? This is their 11th time they're hosting the Super Bowl. I know what you think of Landover, Maryland. I'm just curious what you think of this, because I've played a bowl game, the Sugar Bowl in that thing, and I've played against the Saints in that thing. Do you like broadcasting in it?
Yes and no. Yes, because in 1981 we were on the 50-yard line, and in that very middle deck, that middle area, height-wise, we were just absolutely perfect. But like everything else, they change it and they sell those seats, and now we are practically on the roof looking at little dots. So we do it, and I did it earlier this season, and I can manage. I have no excuses, but it's a lot tougher. It's not like broadcasting at the Link or at MetLife Stadium, where you just have a great view, or in Foxborough where you're in the overhang from the upper deck where you've got a great view, or even in Chicago. There are some great stadiums in which to broadcast. That is not one. If you're a TV broadcaster, they've got the great low, medium. You want to be high enough to see the plays develop. But you're asking me, do I like broadcasting in this? Well, you know what the truth is? I should answer this like this. Yes, I love broadcasting in this Sunday, because I'm broadcasting a Super Bowl and the Eagles are playing and their fans are loving it. So don't worry about me. I'll manage. I'll use my X-ray vision to get close to the play, and we'll have a good broadcast and a lot of fun.
4 Super Bowls out of 59 Merrill Reese will be involved in. Great stuff, Merrill. Thank you so much. And by the way, Coach for 5 Super Bowls, excuse me, that's right. Coach Vermeil said to say hi to you, my friend.
Oh, he's the best. He's the best. I did a show last night. My guest was Irving Fryer, and Irv, he's a trip to talk to. He's funny, and he said, I want to tell you something. He said, this team is going to be even better next year.
Yeah, I agree.
However, I will tell you one thing. The thing I remember most about Super Bowl 15 in New Orleans was getting on the plane the next day. And the players were not morose. They were not sad. They said, you know what? You have to be at one of these things to understand what it's all about. We know. We've got the feeling. We won't be awed by it. It won't be too big for us. We'll come back next year and we'll win the Super Bowl. Well, that next year didn't come until 20-something years later, 24 years later. That's when the next Super Bowl came. What you have to think as a player is, well, we're going to get together next year. We're going to be even better or just as good. You have to realize that this could be your number one and your only chance. You've got to grab that opportunity, because you know what? This won't be the same team. For better or for worse, they won't be the same team, because there will be guys who move on through free agency. There will be changes made. There will be different draft choices coming in. And we never know what the injury factor will be about a given season. Did Detroit have any idea that their indestructible great defensive lineman, Aiden Hutchinson, wouldn't be with them by the end of the season? None of us have any idea. None of us. So for the Eagles, they have got to grab this opportunity and make it happen. And one more thing. A lot of us rooted for Buffalo last week because you like to see the Bills, after all these years, have a chance. But when you really think about it, deep down, you wanted Kansas City.
You do.
Because to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And Eagles, Kansas City, retribution after what happened 2 years ago has arrived. And I think it's going to be a tremendous game, Dan.
Absolutely. You better get those air traffic controllers together again there, Merrill, because you know what we're going to have if you're flying back to Philly, man. Those air traffic controllers are going to have a championship team flying back to Philly.
Well, that's what I said on the air at the end of the broadcast on Sunday. Attention air traffic control. This flock of eagles is heading to New Orleans.
Absolutely. Merrill, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet. Our good friend Merrill Reese. That's pretty cool stuff there, man. I so appreciate that very much. Zander should join us here. Now let me. So wait a minute here. You know who the warm-up backs for Zander Krause were right now? Dick Vermeil and Merrill Reese. Holy